Hello and welcome to The Confident Commit, the podcast for anyone who wants to join the conversation on how to deliver software better and faster.
If you're looking to build a trusted ship, tune in, let's confidently commit.
You're listening to episode 15 of season 2. I'm your host, Rob Zuber, CTO of CircleCI, industry leader for all things CI and CD. Today I'm joined by Bryan Finster, distinguished engineer at Defense Unicorns, and also we're going to talk about this distinguished social media commentator. How about that? I'm so excited to get into like how we communicate with each other about our feelings about software and you know what you learn, I guess, by expressing yourself publicly. That's sort of how we came to meet. I was super interested in some thoughts you were sharing, and I love a lot of things you've talked about. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks. It's great to be here, Rob.
All right. So let's start off really quick. Can you, distinguished engineer, Defense Unicorns, I think people could figure out distinguished engineers, but can you tell me a little bit about just, you know, your background, how you got to what you're doing, and, what, I don't know, I'm going to say what you're passionate about in this space, but I have a feeling that'll be a really long list. So I don't know, a couple things that you're really excited about at the moment when we talk about delivering software effectively.
Well, I've been a software engineer for over 25 years, mostly in the supply chain space. I have a deep background in delivering warehouse management solutions for large enterprises. Actually, my second development job, I changed places, but the problem stayed the same as I moved to Walmart, and that was, another large enterprise we're delivering warehouse management solutions for. But what I focus on right now is the supply chain of software delivery. We piloted continuous delivery at Walmart, and I discovered that made my life as a developer much better. And decided that we needed to help everybody live a better life. That developers should live a better life. I mean, that's what I'm passionate about, is developers should live better lives than the pain that I went through, working 36 hours because you've got production down, you got to get things fixed, that sort of thing. That CD makes that so much better, and so we just need to fix it.
I mean, from the perspective of CircleCI, I couldn't agree more. Like, obviously, we believe very passionately in making developers' lives better. I mean, I think on a different trajectory, I ended up in the same spot, which was, did it once and was like, I'm never going back. This is amazing. Oh, yeah. I love the kind of real world to software supply chain part of that, though. I mean, I guess I was going to say, for folks who don't know Walmart, there might be out there, but I guess for folks who don't think about these pieces, Walmart is world renowned for their management of supply chain. Like, that's how you have lower prices every day, right? Is being really, really good at that.
People see Walmart stores, but Walmart has always been a technology company. And supply chain is the core competency. It's not selling things. It's building a supply chain that's efficient enough that you can sell things at a lower cost than your competition. And I don't work for Walmart anymore, obviously, but I learned a lot there about many, many things.
I can only imagine. My wife actually worked there back in the aughts. Is that what we call it? Like mid-aughts at Walmart.com. And but I got exposed to a lot of that, just how impressive the technology was. And so now we're talking a lot about software supply chain, and we, as in the overall industry, certainly in CI/CD, and I think not everyone has a real world supply chain sort of mental model to build off of. And so they're trying to what's a bill of materials? What does it actually mean for all these different providers? What's just in time versus like I'm warehousing something. All of those things have metaphors in this or analogies,
they
I guess,
do.
in this space.
There's direct connections. I mean, one of the ones I make is that every time you touch a case in a distribution center, it costs money and risk damage. Anytime we touch code, it costs money and risk damage. So we automate all the things, minimize touch points, and have enough validation in there to make sure we're not causing damage. But you're injecting a defect anytime you touch code, so just be aware of that.
It's such a. I mean, it's like you say that, and it sounds awful, but at the same time, I think everyone who's experienced, been around this long enough is just like,
Mhm.
yeah, like let's do the simplest thing possible.
Yeah, don't be clever. Don't be
Right.
clever.
Right. And like we want to be, and that's sort of how we ended up talking, right? So I'll give a little, I made the joke about social media, but you had written some thoughtful insights about, our role as software engineers, software engineering managers, whatever, pick your words, but and the goal of, delivering value for the business versus we'll call it trying to be clever, using latest tech, whatever. And I can't believe I just blew that off as whatever. It's a really important distinction. Like, what is it we're trying to get?
This is important, right? I mean, I've always looked at myself as a business expert solving business problems with code. Mm-hmm. That I can solve the really hard problems that the other people in the business can't because I can solve it with a computer. But it's the business problem we're trying to solve. And I have no reason for doing software development other than if it's a hobby, but software development's not my hobby, other than solving business problems. And if I don't understand the business problems, then I can't make the micro decisions. I can't just keep going back to like the product owner or someone in the business and asking questions because I don't even know if I need to ask a question. I'll just make assumptions and start doing stuff. I need to understand what the business is trying to do so I can make those tiny decisions in the code constantly that are required to do it correctly.
You do it.
And we talked about this before we started recording that this seems not controversial to you and me. Mm-hmm. And yet I've gotten a lot of blowback from people, which you can blow back at me all you want. I don't care. I'm right. A lot of blowback saying, no, our job is just to be really good at coding. I'm like, it's not our job. Our job is to solve problems.
You know what? You said something in there that was really... I won't say it was really important to me, and sort of you glossed over it, which was not knowing that you're making a decision or not realizing there's even a question. You're making an assumption, right? And so we talk a lot, and I remember, because I entertained myself reading a lot of that thread. There was a lot of discussion about, the product manager, someone else's job is to understand the customer and the business, and my job is to implement the technology. But I think that piece about assumptions, like you don't even know sometimes that you're making decisions that actually impact how the customer is going to experience the product. And so if you're making those with the context, right, because you've invested in understanding the business and understanding the customer and understanding their problem. One of the reasons we always talk about, as a startup, scratch your own itch because you understand that customer, you can go really solve the problem of that customer. It's not what everyone does, but I certainly have, when I've worked on things that I understand really well, I do a better job, right?
I build fewer things. Working in platform, right? So I do platform work now, and I really like platform because I understand that customer deeply.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And you see, I mean, it's a really interesting thing about it. First of all, just bucketing engineers into one bucket is very, very strange, right? Like you meet front end developers, for example, who honestly often don't care about the tech underneath it, are just like, I want this pixel perfect representation. I want the customer to have an amazing experience because I'm really like connected. And then platform, who sometimes have no idea what their customer is doing or feeling day to day, but their customer, like that, maybe the business's customer, but the customer of the platform engineer might be another engineer in the organization, and they understand their problem.
You should always, as a developer, right, as a software engineer, you should always be striving to delight your end user, right? I was talking to another platform engineer from ExxonMobil back in 2017. He said, the best engineers seem to come to platform because they can be closer to the customer, right? But I mean, that's the thing. The point is not the technology. The technology is just a tool. The point is making your end user's life easier, right? I mean, you're supposed to be making their life better. That's what we're here for. Nothing else. There's no other point to this. If you're just doing it for a hobby, then do it as a hobby. But if you're professional, master your craft.
Well, so that's a really interesting. I want to follow that segue in 1 second. I was just going to highlight that the number of people whose lives you're trying to make better already in this episode is like really motivating to me. I feel like that's something that gets you out of bed every day. So when you talk about mastering your craft, like as I said, we've spent a lot of this season talking about learning from failure, experimentation. Part of, certainly in your earlier stages of learning to be a great developer, is like mastering the tools and having the opportunity to try different tools, try different things, learn from them.
Yeah.
Oh, this is a good way to approach this problem. This is a bad way to approach this problem. And building those instincts so that later when you go to solve business problems, I mean, you're solving business problems early, but later as you become more senior and think about the big picture business problem, you have some instincts to say, this will probably work really quickly. This won't. So how do we create that space for, younger engineers growing and learning to experiment with different things while simultaneously like I'm a big fan of boring technology. Like what's the simplest thing that's not clever that's just going to allow me to go solve this business problem?
Yeah. Well, I think number one, we need to train more senior engineers to be, because there's a lot of people with the title senior engineer that they're just not. They're just old, or some they got promoted because they code well, but that's not the same as being an engineering leader. We need to train more people to be leaders in engineering so that they can mentor. I mean, the role of a tech lead is to mentor other developers and grow more tech leads. That's the job, right? And teach how to run experiments with limited blast radius. For example, I was on a team once. We had an Angular front end and a Java back end, and we were wanting to run the experiment of what it would feel like if we just had JavaScript front end and back end to just lower the cognitive load on the team. What did we do? Of course, we scrapped all of our Java services and rewrote everything. No, we stood up one JavaScript service, one Node service, for something that was relatively minor, that if it failed, we could replace it rapidly. And we ran a controlled experiment. What's it like? We then got the rest of the team involved. Okay, how do you feel about this? Will it handle the load in production? Is it easy for us to change? And when we decided, this is probably the right way to go, then we just started incrementally replacing all the Java we had with Node over time, methodically. But we ran controlled experiments. If you don't bet the farm, you don't bet the business success on an experiment. You run experiments and then say, yes, this works, let's expand it. And you have to have that mindset of this. The expectation of every experiment is failure. If it succeeds, then we double down.
Right. And I think I end up spending so much time talking about this word failure now. I'm like, I think I have dreams about the word failure. I'm like analyzing it while I'm sleeping because I talk about it so much. But I really think when we talk about experiments, it's not even like when you head in with the notion that we're probably going to fail, it's more like I just have two options. I have a sense of which one is going to be more productive or useful or is going to drive the impact, but I'm testing them, right? And the way that I learn is by testing them and seeing what result I get, right?
Right. Yeah.
And I think being open to that is absolutely critical. And I think to your point on whether it's a service migration or anything else, finding a way to constrain it and learn as quickly as possible, whether it's having the impact you anticipated, right? Like there's probably a paper prototype version of that, which is just ask all your engineers how many of them even like writing. Like, am I going to have a mutiny when I choose this other language? Like, let's not bother writing a service because everyone here hates it. We don't need to even build one, right? Like, we already know that that's not going to work well. Or people are really excited about it and the notion sounds good to folks. Great. Let's actually run this, next level kind of small experiment, and then we can grow up from there. And I do think we get hung up on thinking harder about a problem, being more right about the problem before we go try to get any kind of feedback or data. And that feedback and data can often be very, very.
Yeah, you can wind yourself up in analysis paralysis, or you just never try the experiment. It's like, hey, look, we want to try a thing, but let's make sure we control our variables. Be scientific about it, right? Be disciplined about it. And if you want to be a good engineer, you're disciplined about what you do. That means that we don't say, hey, you know what, I want to learn a new language, so let's just add another language to the stack. No, you need to make sure that what you're doing is best for the business. Right. And that you're making decisions as that's your primary focus. What's best for the business? In this case, what I was talking about, I thought it might be best if we had less cognitive load. We could tear down the wall we had between the front end and back end developers on the team. And make it easier for us to collaborate together. That was best. It grew the team. It was better for the business. Right.
So Absolutely. And so the thing that's interesting to me in that, then, as a leader, right? You mentioned tech leads and how they mentor the more junior folks to come up.
Mm-hmm.
There are
They should.
real. Sorry. Yes. Sorry. That's their role, I think, is what you said. Yes. To be accurate in quoting you,
Yes.
You didn't say they all do it. So when you think about, I love this notion of boring technology, and I think that there's talk of innovation tokens, which other people have brought up on this podcast before, but like there's a couple specific areas where in our business or your business or anybody's business, there's unique and interesting technology where we're going to innovate, and that's going to drive the business forward. And everywhere else, we should do the most mundane, simple thing that everybody already knows how to do, knows how it fails in production. Like we don't want to be worrying about that because we're trying to do the thing that's going to really set us apart. So how do you, I guess, instill that in folks, like through that, tech leadership and mentoring? What is how do you ensure that people really get that message or, build those values? Is that something you select and hire for, something that you mentor and train into folks?
You mentor it. I mean, you talk to people about their ideas, right? Mm-hmm. You don't shut people down. If someone has an idea and you don't even think it'll work with them on what the experiment will be and let them try it. If the experiment doesn't work, it's like, well, okay, we learned something. And to your point, it's not really failure, right? It's just, it didn't do what we hoped it would do. It did something else. We've learned from that. What did we learn? Right. But we don't, but it's that balance between, we want to keep pushing for better ways to deliver business value, because otherwise we'd still just be coding in, CICS or I don't know COBOL or any of that stuff. I don't know mainframe stuff, but we'd all be just stuck on mainframe technology. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Rosalind Radcliffe is going to yell at me. But we need to keep pushing the envelope, but we need to do it in ways that's safe, that we don't risk everything. I've seen people just go all in on things and make huge business bets that they had no business making because they wanted to use technology a specific way. And I've seen it cost millions, tens of millions of dollars when they do. Mm-hmm. And I consider that professional misconduct. We are there for a reason, and it's not to entertain ourselves.
That's such a great point, which is, I think, buried in that statement is the notion that the engineering team, engineering leaders are actually the experts on the technology and should be presenting back to other stakeholders. These are the options that we have, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I understand what it is you're trying to do, and here are some options. This is why we think this might be compelling and drive us forward, but also has this risk associated with it. And then that's a conversation that we have together. How do we want to proceed? Does this feel like an area where we can really differentiate by doing something, but it's going to be risky, versus, this actually feels like we could do a really simple version. It maybe doesn't have everything that you want, but we'll get it done really quickly. It'll be super cheap. We can rely on it, and then we can go focus on the next thing. And I sometimes get the sense that sort of engineers end up in this place where they're like, cool, you told me what you need. Now I will go off and figure out how to build it, and sort of, to the point of making assumptions, make those assumptions about risk and cost and everything else.
This is one of the reasons why, there's many reasons why I drive continuous delivery so hard as a workflow, right? Now this is technology. Real quickly, I had somebody at a conference last week ask me, oh yeah, what tools do you focus on for improving delivery? I'm like, I don't care. The tools are completely irrelevant.
We'll talk about that after.
Yeah, you can talk about that after.
Fine. That's fine.
The tools don't matter. It's the mindset of small batch, real fast, get rapid feedback, right? Mm-hmm. That continuous delivery is a workflow where you are working constantly with the people that need the thing and getting feedback, and you're building that partnership instead of, I'm going to go build a thing and you're going to be the victim of the thing. Mm-hmm. No, we're now a team. And the teamwork is so much better than just, you just tell me what you want and I'll go deliver something and hopefully it's the right thing. Because the reality is, and I have this definition of the agile mindset. I hate agile mindset. I hate almost everything agile. Because it's mostly BS that people market to pay for their boats. But agile mindset is The requirements are probably wrong. We'll probably misunderstand them, and they'll probably change before we can deliver. So we need to build a delivery process to mitigate those. And that's CD.
Right. I totally agree. I don't know about the boats. I don't have one, so someone else is doing this better than I am. But
I don't either, because I open source everything.
We'll learn someday. The way that I often express it is that, like, this whole evolution, agile, CI, CD, whatever, it all stems from the assumption that we're probably wrong. We just don't know what we're wrong about or in what direction right is. So how fast can we learn, right? What's the smallest amount that we can do where we can course correct and go in the direction of what's right? Go in the direction of what the customer really wants.
Wrong, right? I mean, the mindset I see a lot of developers have is, oh, no, I know what's best and I'm correct, right? Mm-hmm. You're correct when you have data to show you're correct. So the things, when I say that I know for a fact this is true, it's because I've actually collected data and I know for a fact that it's true. Otherwise, I'm probably wrong in some way. But we'll find out.
And I think going back to the experiment mindset, and we sort of didn't quite close off on that, and sort of growing younger engineers or younger people in the product probably as well in other areas by thinking about the experiment. Like, I can't really tell you what's right either, but I can tell you how to learn that quickly and to think about something with an experimental mindset. Like, the only thing that's true is the thing that we have data, and we don't have any data. So what's the fastest way that we can get that feedback? And that data might not be, big data and ML and whatever. It might be 3 users who told us, this is awesome, I would totally pay for it. Like, let's go try it now and see if they're right. I just need something. Give me some signal so I can build on that or try something else, right? And so I think huge to instill that whole mindset in folks. That's just like, there's no one here that knows all the answers, right? Like, why would we all be here if one of us had, I think we idolize like the entrepreneur that had the right idea from the beginning and managed to like build the perfect product, but we all know what actually happens out in the world.
Do any of those actually exist? Because I know a lot of people had bright ideas that they had to rapidly iterate on those bright ideas, but I've never met anyone who had a bright idea out the gate and it was exactly that.
I don't know.
I don't know everybody. It's possible.
I even if it exists, right? I think probably some people get lucky by being closer to where they would have ended up iterating to out of the gate than others. But the people who understand how to iterate and learn quickly are the ones that are going to win in the end, right? Yeah. The ones who are truly building something that customers desire. So building that mindset and then using that to build the information to say, okay, now we have more confidence. Like, does right and wrong even count in this space? Like, if I'm talking about, is it optimal? It's sort of like, have I optimized for the right user base? Have I got a big enough? Because there's always some customer who's going to.
Have I built it in a way where I can scale it? Have I built it in a way where I can pivot? When I find out how wrong I was. All these competing things you have to. That's why it's called engineering. Yes. And I hate when people call it an art. And say, oh, no, it's not engineering, it's art. Well, number one, the Chrysler building took engineering. And if you look at it, it's also art, but it's engineering.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, for me, that definition primarily revolves around trade-offs. Like, do I understand? And I think we struggle. So my background is a little bit more classical engineering, although it's engineering physics, which you can't really like put your hands on or like figure out a cost model for. But, well, I guess whatever. It doesn't matter. Building a bridge, building the Chrysler building, right? It's like, I have this much money to build this building. It needs to meet all of these codes. How do I make the decision about the steel I'm using, the concrete I'm using? Like, am I going to have glass here or whatever? And I kind of have to have a plan. You don't build
the Chrysler building with experimental steel.
Right. Exactly. But I mean, we're limited by our editors, and so to some degree, right? It's like, I can write any code, and the cost is how much investment I'm going to make and how risky that's going to be over time, which I think we struggle to really see up front. But we have the advantage that we can do that in small increments and say, cool, but I'm going to just, limit it down to this little thing that I'm going to try. Yeah. And then that's going to, which is, you can't do that to build a bridge or to build a building. Like, oh, let's pour some concrete here. I don't really like that concrete. Let's move it over here. Like, that's just not an option that we have. And so we have a lot of advantages, but we're also sometimes the victim of the lack of constraints in a way, right? And so turning that to...
We talked a little bit about this before. We both have a background in photography. back in the day, you had 24, 27 shots on a roll of film. And so you treasured every shutter push because it was going to cost you money to develop it. And you only had so many before you change rolls of film. Now with digital photography, I just hold down the shutter and it just fills up a 128 gig memory card. That lack of constraints is actually a problem because you'll never go back and edit those photos and find the one you want.
Right.
It's the same. I mean, we need to focus on the problems we're trying to solve and solve tiny pieces of that problem and get feedback. And the bigger we make every change, the more risky it is that it's wrong. And the harder it is to fix.
Yeah. Yeah, I think sort of reorienting our discipline around that is a big part of the struggle. And, to bring it all the way back to the beginning, understanding the goals of the business is one of the biggest constraints that's going to inform this is going to be the most valuable thing that I can do right now, right? Or this is where...
Don't do resume-driven development, right? I mean, just don't do that. I mean, focus... another conversation you may not have seen, right, is somebody was talking about trying to convince other developers they need to test their code. I won't convince another developer to test their code. I'll just make sure that they're nowhere near me because they're not an actual software engineer. They're a script kiddie. Right? Script kiddies can write code all day long. A software engineer tests their things. A software engineer delivers working solutions. They know they work because they tested them. That's the job. It's not somebody else's job, right? And so all of this plays in together. You need to focus on what it is. If you're going to be a software engineer, know what the job is. Don't just say, well, open source does this thing and I do it that way. No. We're software engineers. We're not hobbyists.
And oh my gosh, we could go another half hour on just that. But the thing that's so interesting to me there is every organization is different. Like you could see, because there are lots of people who think about this differently. And I think it's really important within an organization. And I get the sense that you clearly describes this folks that you work with, that you establish those parameters. This is what the job is here. This is how we think about it. And then as engineers, or software developers, whatever term we want to use, you can make the decision to go work in an environment that fits you. But if you're in an environment that shares these beliefs, then you need to own up to that. And
the reality is though that the opinions I have aren't based off of I worked in an organization that was the opinions an organization had. The opinions I have come from 2 decades of being on support. And I think a big problem we have in the industry right now is that not enough developers operate what they build. They do grenade-driven development. They throw it over the wall for somebody else to support their garbage. And so they don't get that direct feedback of, oh, this is garbage. It's breaking all the time.
Well, for anyone who's listening that wants to come work at CircleCI, you will enjoy operating your software. I mean,
awesome.
We are very. I participate in operating software because I believe that's strongly in it. So we're big fans. That's probably evident in what we do.
Run what you run.
Since it sounds like you've probably lived through a few interesting moments in all of this, I'm gonna bring this to a close with the Red Build Rewind. Can you tell me about a time that you maybe it was a hypothesis, maybe it was something bigger, sort of. Expected something to go some particular way. It didn't go that way. It sort of felt catastrophic in the moment, but ultimately taught you something that you've been able to carry with you and build on.
I think the last time I actually worked on a waterfall project brought home the fact that for sure, no matter what, waterfall's stupid. And that's, we spent 18 months, I think, on a project to merge a whole bunch of warehouse management systems into one warehouse management system, replace the database layer with a complete new data model, slammed a bunch of code together and built new things and then installed it. And it was absolutely catastrophic. Because we did the ISDLC. I mean, we designed and then we did the tech documentation and we built it and then we tested it and then kaboom. Right?
Yeah.
Don't ever do that.
I'm like, I can't quite respond because I'm just having all these flashbacks. It's like stress. But, it's fascinating because we are where we are. It's 2022. We've been talking about shifting out of waterfall for 25 plus years or whatever. And some I work with people now who haven't live that, right? They're like, sure, agile, fine, or whatever, but don't necessarily have the I don't just the history or the context to understand how we got here. And that's probably
the
fine.
Personal pain.
Right.
And the thing about our industry is people seem to feel like they need to feel personal pain before they'll believe stories like this. So how can we share those stories and say, look, dude, seriously, I've been awake for many, many hours and I don't want that for you. Would you just please listen to me?
Yeah. I mean, I just have really great memories of like sleeping on a rack shelf in a data center trying to get something rolled out for like 7 days straight or whatever. Like, yeah, I wouldn't wish that on anyone, but it's kind of like, you're right. Like lots of people have told me not to do things. I need to find ways to fail at them myself before I truly get it. So how do we get people to have that understanding? But that doesn't feel like a safe failure. Here, go do this 18-month project and then you'll see why it's a bad idea. Like I wouldn't really sign up for that, and I wouldn't sign up to have people go do that. So I think we need to find that balance. And maybe it's this. Maybe it's the campfire stories and the podcasts and everything else to just, help people understand that
I've failed a lot.
Living in the good life.
I mean, I don't talk about these things because I've been successful my entire career. I've mostly been failing. So just for the love of God, sleep more than I did. Just listen, please.
Awesome. Well, with that, thanks so much for joining. Thanks to everyone for tuning in today. If you enjoyed the podcast, subscribe on your podcast provider of choice. If there's anyone you want us to talk to or things you want us to talk about, find us on Twitter at CircleCI. Bryan, thanks so much for joining. Such a pleasure to have you.
Yeah, Rob, thanks so much for asking me to come and rant a little bit at you.
Appreciate it.